Todd Williams, a respected airline pilot, and his new wife Emily, a young nurse with a heart full of dreams, seemed destined for a perfect life together. But what began as a fairy tale wedding quickly spiraled into a nightmare on their honeymoon in Bora Bora. Behind the photos of white sand beaches and glowing sunsets lay a dark truth: control, rage, and a violent secret that would turn paradise into a crime scene. Todd Williams carried himself with the kind of confidence that impressed everyone around him. As a commercial airline pilot, he was admired for his calm presence, his sharp uniform, and the prestige that came with his career. Friends described him as ambitious and disciplined, someone who had worked hard to reach the top. When he met Emily, a nurse with a gentle spirit and a love for helping others, the match seemed perfect. Emily came from a modest background, but her warmth and kindness drew people to her instantly. She believed she had found not just a husband, but a partner who could give her the life she had always dreamed of. Their romance unfolded quickly, marked by trips, expensive dinners, and gifts that dazzled Emily. She was swept up by Todd's charm and the excitement of being with someone whose life seemed larger than hers. Yet, even in the early days, there were signs of unease. Todd was protective to the point of being possessive. He disliked when Emily spent too much time with friends, and he often questioned her choices. Emily, wanting to believe the best in him, explained it away as love and concern. By the time Todd proposed, Emily felt both thrilled and hesitant. Her parents noticed how often he spoke over her in conversation and how quiet she had become compared to before. Still, the promise of a glamorous wedding and a bright future convinced her to move forward. Their wedding day looked like a fairy tale, captured in smiling photographs and joyful celebrations. Friends and family believed they were witnessing the beginning of a perfect marriage. But beneath the happiness were cracks that no one wanted to see. Cracks that would grow wider once the honeymoon began. The arrival in Bora Bora felt like stepping into a dream. The ocean stretched in endless shades of turquoise, palm trees swayed in the breeze, and their overwater bungalow seemed to float on a sheet of glass. Staff greeted them with flowers and champagne, and photos captured them smiling as if nothing in the world could break their joy. To anyone watching, the couple looked deeply in love. But inside the private walls of their bungalow, the cracks in their relationship were widening. Emily wanted to enjoy the island's beauty, explore its villages, and savor the peace she had imagined for months. Todd, however, demanded control over every detail. He decided what they would eat, how they would spend each day, and when Emily's suggestions did not align with his, he grew sharp and impatient. She tried to laugh it off, to smooth the tension, but resort staff noticed the subtle unease, her forced smiles, her quiet nods, and the way she shrank slightly when Todd's tone changed. To outsiders, moments of tenderness gave the impression of a happy couple. Todd wrapped his arm around Emily for photos, bought her gifts, and raised his glass to toast their future. But the affection never lasted long. Behind closed doors, arguments erupted over the smallest things, leaving Emily unsettled and unsure of what each evening would bring. The island itself seemed like a cruel contrast, paradise surrounding a marriage already turning sour. Emily convinced herself it was only stress, that once they returned home, things would calm down. But as each day passed, she felt the dream slipping away. What was supposed to be the happiest time of her life was quickly becoming a silent battle to keep peace, even as the shadows of Todd's anger grew darker. On their third night in Bora Bora, the atmosphere shifted from uneasy tension to devastating violence. The day had started with a carefully arranged beach dinner under the stars, a romantic gesture organized by the resort. Candlelight flickered across the sand, and from a distance the couple appeared content. But Emily's smile was strained, and those nearby noticed her eyes were swollen, as if she had been crying earlier. Todd raised his glass with forced charm, while Emily kept her gaze low, quietly enduring the evening. When they returned to their bungalow, the fragile calm broke apart. Neighbors in the surrounding villas later reported hearing muffled voices rising in anger, followed by heavy thuds and sharp noises that echoed across the wooden floors. The sounds grew violent, punctuated by what seemed like cries quickly silenced. No one realized then that Emily was fighting for her life. By morning, the illusion of paradise was shattered. Emily was discovered lying motionless on the floor of the bungalow, her body marked with deep bruises and severe head trauma. Furniture was overturned, glass lay shattered across the room, and bloodstains on the floor suggested a brutal struggle. Todd insisted she had slipped and fallen, desperately clinging to the story of a tragic accident. But the evidence told another story, one of rage and violence that no explanation could erase. The honeymoon that had begun with laughter and photographs had ended in horror. Emily, who had dreamed of starting her new life in paradise, was gone. And Todd, the man she trusted above all, stood at the center of a scene that revealed not devotion but destruction. What had happened inside that bungalow was no accident. It was the night everything broke. Todd's frantic call to hotel staff came just after dawn. His voice shook with urgency as he claimed that Emily had slipped, fallen, and hit her head. Resort employees rushed to the bungalow, only to be met with a scene that raised immediate suspicion. Emily's injuries were far too extensive for a simple fall. Bruises covered her arms, her face was swollen, and her body bore marks of a struggle. The bungalow itself looked like a storm had torn through it. Tables overturned, shattered glass on the floor, and signs of chaos that no accident could explain. Local authorities arrived quickly, sealing off the area. Todd played the role of a devastated husband, pacing the bungalow with his head in his hands, repeating his story of a tragic accident. Yet his performance faltered under scrutiny. While his words spoke of grief, his behavior showed something else. He asked repeatedly when he would be able to leave the island, mentioning his career and his airline more often than Emily. Investigators noted his lack of genuine emotion, his eyes dry, his tone defensive rather than sorrowful. Forensic examinations only deepened the doubts. Emily's body revealed defensive wounds on her arms, cuts that suggested she had fought back, and head trauma consistent with repeated blows rather than a single fall. Blood patterns on the floor aligned with a violent struggle, not an accident. Todd's carefully crafted explanation unraveled piece by piece. Authorities began looking into his background, uncovering reports of his temper and controlling behavior. Behind the polished exterior of a successful pilot was a man who demanded dominance and lashed out when defied. In Bora Bora, his mask had slipped, and investigators were determined to prove that Emily's death was no accident, but the result of deliberate violence. As investigators dug deeper, the image of a devoted husband quickly began to crumble. Emily's closest friends were contacted, and their accounts painted a far different picture of the marriage than the one shown on social media. She had confided in a few that Todd's temper frightened her. In messages sent just weeks before the wedding, she admitted she sometimes felt trapped, worried about his need for control, but unsure how to step away after so much had already been planned. One friend revealed that Emily had even considered postponing the ceremony, but the pressure of family, guests, and expenses convinced her to move forward. The discoveries did not end there. Investigators learned that just before the honeymoon, Todd had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Emily. The timing was suspicious, and the amount was large enough to raise serious questions about his motives. What looked at first like a crime of passion began to appear more calculated, as if the paradise honeymoon had been chosen not for romance, but for isolation. In such a remote setting, Todd may have believed he could stage a convincing accident, far from the scrutiny of home. Prosecutors built their case around these revelations. They argued that Todd's desire for control and financial gain created a dangerous combination. The violent outbursts were not new, but Emily's death was the first time they had escalated beyond intimidation and fear. His charm, once used to win her over, was now exposed as a mask that concealed a darker side. The perfect life he projected, a prestigious career, a beautiful new wife, a glamorous honeymoon, was nothing more than a facade. And behind it was a man willing to destroy everything to maintain power and benefit from tragedy. The trial that followed drew worldwide attention, fueled by the shocking contrast between the idyllic setting of Bora Bora and the brutal crime that had taken place there. News outlets filled their broadcasts with images of turquoise waters and luxury bungalows, paired with headlines about murder on a dream honeymoon. The case captivated the public, who struggled to reconcile the smiling wedding photos of Todd and Emily with the horror of what had unfolded just days later. In court, prosecutors laid out a chilling narrative. They showed evidence of Emily's defensive wounds, photographs of the chaotic crime scene, and testimony from resort staff who had heard arguments during the trip. Medical experts explained that her injuries were consistent with a prolonged and violent assault, not a simple fall. Witnesses from home described Todd's controlling nature and Emily's growing fears before the wedding. Most damning of all was the recently purchased life insurance policy, which prosecutors argued revealed both premeditation and greed. Todd's defense clung to the story of an accident, portraying him as a man devastated by loss, but his words rang hollow against the overwhelming weight of evidence. Jurors listened as experts dismantled his version of events, piece by piece, until there was little left but the truth. After weeks of testimony, the verdict was clear: guilty of murder. The sentence handed down ensured that Todd would spend the rest of his life in prison, his once promising career and carefully crafted image destroyed forever. For Emily's family, justice brought some measure of closure, though the loss remained immeasurable. What was meant to be the start of a lifelong journey together had ended in violence, betrayal, and tragedy. Even in paradise, the darkness that Todd carried within him had claimed everything.